Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. My name is Alexis Mercedes Rink. I'm a renter, a transit rider. I used to be a waitress, and now I'm running for Seattle City Council to fight for a city that works for all of us and not just to select wealthy few. I've spent my public policy career building a reputation of bringing people together around solutions and making them happen. I've worked across 39 cities and with over 100 different organizations. And as a graduate of UW, I've done really critical and policy work in my career. I've brought together our King County community under a 5-year plan to address homelessness. I've built King County's first severe weather response system because climate change is here and now, and we need to act to save lives, especially as we're facing extreme heat. And today I work as the assistant director at UW's budget office. And I was brought to this work because of my upbringing, because I'm proudly raised by my grandparents. When my birth dad was incarcerated when he was just a teenager. My birth mom lost custody of me shortly after that. And if it were not for my grandparents, I would have gone to the foster care system. But I got the chance to grow up in a resource community, a proud union household, and I was given the tools that I needed to heal. And I'm here today as a living testament to when we invest in young people, regardless of their beginnings, we can change generations. My birth dad is alive today because of a transitional housing program. We need to protect those investments. And in the wake of our city's budget crisis, we need to step up, balance our budget, pursue progressive revenue to fully fund our city services so we can develop housing, so we can help folks recover, expand our transit system, address climate change, and make a safe community for everybody. So, I am really proud of the momentum of my campaign. I'm proudly endorsed by King County Democrats and every legislative district fully located within the city of Seattle as of this week, as well as amazing progressive leaders in the Washington State Legislature, including Representative Macri, Senator Sutton, and many more. And so, with that, I'll pass it to you.
Hi, my name is Tanya Wu. I'm your Seattle City Council member. I'm a small mom-and-pop restaurant owner, as well as an affordable housing provider and a community advocate. I grew up in Beacon Hill and now live in the Rainier Valley with deep roots in the Chinatown International District. Seattle is my hometown, and I can't think of being anywhere else. So serving as your citywide council member, I tackled our toughest issues head-on. I've organized community safety teams to address public safety issues and converted the historic Louisa Hotel into workforce housing to combat gentrification and displacement. I championed government accountability and helped our unsheltered neighbors in crisis. As we are transitioning and finding our new identity in the city, there are 3 priorities that remain crystal clear for me. The first one is we need to create safe communities for everyone. Every neighborhood has a different need for safety, and we have to be very intentional about making sure the right response is responding to the right situation. We must fully staff our first responders and support common sense reforms to ensure timely and effective emergency responses. Second, we need to invest in what truly works to address homelessness. We need more resources that include addiction treatment, crisis intervention, and programs that bring people inside. With the fentanyl crisis growing, we can't afford to continue strategies that aren't working. Third, we must address the rising cost of living. Affordability, I feel, is really important this year. With my experience in developing affordable housing, I'm working on creative solutions to ensure that Seattle remains within reach for everyone. So I'm committed to delivering compassionate results and focusing on what matters most. I listen to understand and to learn. I believe I'm a true team player that wants to serve you. I'm Tanya Wu and ask for your vote to keep Seattle an affordable, safe, and compassionate place to live. Thank you.
I'm going to start my own timer so I can also keep track. Also before, congratulations to Alexis for being the first to qualify for Democracy Vouchers. So that was something that she also recently got to. Hi everyone, my name is Tara Yusuf. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm running for Seattle City Council. I was born and raised in New Holly and currently live with my wife in Fremont. In Seattle, we are facing unprecedented regional challenges. I don't need to remind a lot of you that everything from our community well-being to our fundamental rights are being challenged up and down from the federal level to the local level. What we need in this moment is a global perspective and someone that can apply that with the local ones. A lot of folks I've talked with here have seen the way the city has transformed over time and seen how we failed to plan time and again for the growth that our city had to step up to. Whether it was the decisions made for the interstate, whether it was not taking federal money for a reliable train and subway system, or whether it was the way that we've designed parts of our social safety net. I'm really passionate about this, and I decided to run because I grew up in public housing among a lot of refugee communities. I relied on programs from food stamps to Pell Grants, and now I'm a homeowner and I live with my family when my wife happens. My experience and perspective and passion is the reason I'm running. I'm tired of seeing the people in the communities that I'm part of slowly be forced out and these cultural institutions vanishing. A lot of the issues that we have are interconnected and require innovative solutions and a fresh perspective that can link all of them together, not just piecemeal in Parliament. In the last few seconds, my priorities are social programs, equity and justice in our communities, and boosting community-centric solutions. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sonatina Sanchez, and I'm also a daughter of Seattle. I was born here in 1983, and I grew up in Holly Park, and moved to Kingsway Apartments and then Yesler Terrace. I experienced busing from the south end to the north end, and that experience showed me a lot about how the people of my community get left behind. And I am still one of those people from my community being left behind. I'm still living in public housing, and I'm actually proud of that. I chose to live in public housing because I believe that when we share resources with each other, we all thrive more. From my living in public housing, I have connected with neighbors, and they helped me get onto the board of Community Roots Housing, where in the first 2 years of my being on the board, we are forming the Resident Advisory Board, where members from every single building in the city are now meeting and discussing how to maintain our buildings as a community, as residents, as our homes. And that's the kind of work I've been doing in Seattle for the last 20 years. I sat on the board of League of Women Voters of Seattle-King County, so I can work to make sure that voting rights as appropriate for everyone, available for everyone. And I really look forward to bringing my experience with Transit Writers Union, which endorsed me as a co-founder of the Bus and Transit Service Work Group, because they know that when a passionate advocate is able to advance, we all win. So thank you very much for your time today.
Okay, now these will be 1.5-minute responses, and we will start with Tanya as we rotate, so just pass the mic on down and around. What is the issue you hope to tackle immediately upon swearing in? What issue will take longer, but is still important to you? Why?
Thank you. Since I have built housing, and I believe building more housing is of paramount importance, especially since it intersects a lot of the issues we see within the city of affordability with helping our unhoused neighbors. And so something that I'm tackling currently that will take time because sometimes SEPA is involved is looking at how do we incentivize development, especially looking at the permitting process, since I've been through that process, and making sure how do we streamline that. How can we look at our current developer incentive programs like MHA, and FTE, and how do we really examine what's working, what's not working, and bring it relevant up to this year. And so I'm working on a couple pieces of legislation that involves that developer incentive, very similar to Connecticut Communities, but with data and the Office of Housing MOTE formula to make sure that there is that correct balance of developer incentive and community benefit to make get low AMIs down and help people who really need housing, which is people within I believe 50% in mind under just average median income. And try to get that lowered. I'm also looking at ways on how do we fight teenage displacement. I'm looking at cease and desist orders on predatory real estate solicitations, many of our Black homeowners are inundated with home visits and phone calls and mailers on trying to sell their property. And we need to be able to help people retain generational wealth. Thank you.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges with this race is that the term is 1 year, you go for re-election again. But with that limited time, the first thing I'd like to work on is expanding alternate response strategies. We've seen some really great success with the CARE team and similar efforts across the United States. And we've seen when we provide a more graceful interaction when someone is faced with a confrontation from a state official, it helps produce better outcomes consistently. So that's the first thing that I'd like to do. The second thing is I'd like to work on building out a more holistic plan. I know we have the comp planning that just finished up, but I think that there's more that we can do that partners with local communities and helps empower local communities to be able to both ensure that their community members are able to stay in those same places that they were born and raised in, and ensure that when we're looking at building housing, when we're looking at building urban centers, we're actually ensuring that we're building it in a way where we can have communities as part of it. Because I think one of the challenges that we have with urban housing is that they're just buildings that people can live in. Fundamentally, community is much more than buildings, it's the people that are in them. I think that is something that we see.
The first thing that I want to tackle is our homelessness crisis. We have a lot of people currently sleeping on the streets, and I believe that if we stabilize people where they are and actually provide services, that we can make a big impact on people being able to access the housing that is currently available, and make sure that we are able to tackle a long-term housing project with slightly less urgency when we know our neighbors are being taken care of. I helped support a warming shelter at Manor Anderson Park during the coldest days of winter. We made sure that when we were evicted from the spot, we were able to reform that same day to make sure that caseworkers and the people who were surviving on the street and didn't have access to public warming shelters or anything like that were able to still survive. And so that's one of the things that I believe, that if we stabilize people and make sure that they have supported services like sanitation, bathrooms, garbage pickup, we can maintain the quality of life in our neighborhoods and increase people's quality of life who are currently not having the best time. And in terms of long range, that's easy. 24/7, 365 bathrooms in parks and in every single park in the city as needed. I know there's small parks, so we can't get them in all of them, but like we need to focus on those kinds of day-to-day needs of our community. So that's my long range plan.
So the issue I'd like to tackle that in the immediate term, and something that will absolutely take longer, is the financial health of our city. We are facing a $260 million budget deficit. That will have tremendous consequences on our ability to do our work across the city. We don't know where cuts could be, but I think we should be clear that if we don't act to pursue some type of additional revenue option, there will be cuts, and we don't know where those will be happening. And I think we could do a lot of work also by focusing on the financial health of the city, and this will do right by our city workers. The departments right now have been under this financial stress of this looming deficit. This will bring some more stability to our city work. And I think it's important to note how we got here. And there's a myriad of reasons, but the one that I think we should elevate in this moment is that the city, in the midst of the COVID pandemic, stepped up and used federal funding to deploy resources to community and stood up programs that our community needed to survive and weather what was a terrible time for all of us. And the fact of the matter is, the need in community remains. It's probably higher than ever. And so, with that, I am committed to finding an equitable way to address this, of course, by finding a way to pursue progressive revenue and making sure that corporations pay their fair share so we can keep our libraries open, our schools open, people fed, develop housing. All of these things require funding. Thank you.
I think they deserve an applause. The next question again, a minute and a half. You are running for one of two citywide council seats. How do you see the role of this position differing from that of the district seats? And how would you expect to collaborate and coordinate with the other council members?
Think I'm starting?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, seeing that it was this seat specifically that was opened up kind of cemented my decision to run for city council. And one of the things I'm really excited about this seat in particular is it requires a holistic perspective of the city. We know that Seattle has been historically, is still suffering from the history of redlining and the regressive tax system that has built public infrastructure that is unequal between from one neighborhood to another. And so, how I think it differs from the specific district ones is that you need to be able to figure out how are you building plans with equity across different positions. And I think that is a big thing. The other part that I think is really important is it gives you a broader perspective of what are the big issues affecting different parts of the city, right? Like if I was representing West Seattle, I'd probably worry a lot about transportation when the bridge was out, right? And I imagine a number of you did. But when you're looking at the broader perspective, it can maybe give you a perspective of how different issues link together in a way that you may not see just focusing on one particular district. So that's what I think what excites me about this position and why I think this position is really important.
Yeah, District 8 being citywide means that you have to consider the needs of everybody in Seattle around the decisions that are made. And I think that this particular position interacts with the other council members by giving a little bit of a pressure release on each district office and another place for residents to come if their particular district representative isn't quite with them. So that's why I think it's also very important that we have a diversity of opinions and diversity of viewpoints of world life experiences on the council, because we do need to make sure that everybody is comfortable engaging with our political system, and that's not the reality that we have right now. I do really love to organize in community. As Transit Riders Union member, as Cascade Bicycle Club advocate, I've done a lot of work in making sure that we have bike lanes and pedestrian access all over the city. And so I know how each district is affected by the same issues, and I do want to make sure that those problems are solved interconnectedly. And that's, I think, the best thing about this position is you get to help the whole city connect to each other. And I think that's also counts for the districts connecting within each district too.
I think one of the most exciting things, even campaigning so far, has been being across the city and learning about all the complex differences and issues that communities are facing, and what is similar and what is similar across communities. What are the kinds of challenges that we're facing that connect us, and how is it different? And that is the exciting part about the citywide position, being able to work across our full communities and honor those differences, and also thread the needle to bring folks together to create comprehensive strategy. And I'm excited by the opportunity to work with each of the district-specific representatives on council, just given my experience working across 39 cities in my professional career. When I worked for the Sound Cities Association, I staffed for 40 different people at once, representing 38 cities. And so really working across the spectrum, often oftentimes in caucus meetings with folks, maybe 8 people, each representing a different city, all kinds of opinions, and trying to bring folks together to see what are the common threads that we can all agree upon, and being able to champion change that way, and having a lot of hard conversations along the way to get to that point. And similarly, doing that work while working across our county to figure out what is our strategy for addressing homelessness, what can we agree to do together. And that's the kind of work I love doing. That's the heart of the work, because I fundamentally agree and find that government is what we agree to do together. And the heart of it is putting the issues on the table and finding where do we agree, how can we move forward, and how can we best serve people.
As many of us here on this table have grown up in Seattle, I grew up in a small business environment. My family had mom and pop restaurants and bakeries, so I would grow up as a little kid, worked at my family's restaurant, Wallingford, the Blue Temple restaurant. We had a Monhay bakery right next to Ezel's at the U District, but every single day I call myself a lifelong waitress because I'm still working in a restaurant, essentially after work. And so learning and growing up here about how different every single neighborhood, every single community is, and the intricacies, as well as running last year in a District 2, South Seattle, and growing up in the Chinatown International District, one of the most, I believe, underserved neighborhoods. We're the poorest neighborhood in the city. We're also one of the most endangered neighborhoods in the nation. And so I believe government should really aim to serve those who are in need of services and who traditionally have not had a chance to get their voice at the table. And so campaigning district-wide was very different than campaigning citywide, and learned that as we go. As well as, last year, we had amazing friends along the campaign trail with many colleagues here who I work well with and collaborate with and support, especially since our district representatives know their communities, know their constituents. And so how am I supportive? How do I learn about how each person in their district works? I mean, some of them are a little more protective of the district than others, and so making sure I don't step on any toes and working together, but it comes with coordination. Thank you.
I always say I feel like Phil Donahue, but I'm not running as much. So now we talked about citywide, but West Seattle has no services for people experiencing homelessness. And yet there are thousands here living outdoors on our streets and in the green belts. No shelters, no daycares, no day centers, no feeding programs. Private citizens and local churches offer services by themselves without help from the city or county. What do you propose for services for our unsheltered neighbors?
Thank you. I'll wait to it.
Oh, okay. So, as I said earlier, I spent basically January through March supporting a warming shelter next to Cal Anderson Park in my neighborhood on Capitol Hill. And we do have lots of resources in my district, in my neighborhood, but it's still not enough because private citizens like me are also doing a lot of the social outreach to our houseless neighbors right now. And I can tell you from personal experience, thousands of dollars of supportive material were thrown away in encampment evictions that we experienced in those 3 months. And that is, we're not only not being supported by the city, we're being punished. And my main focus in getting into office is bringing that voice and that perspective to the halls of power and making sure that a strong voice who is still being affected by these issues is present in these rooms. I think we should support rather than punish neighbors who care for each other. We are neighbors, we are Seattleites. Whether you live inside or you're currently forced to sleep outside, we are all neighbors, and I want to make sure that the people who step up in each neighborhood are supported with comprehensive services like sanitation and garbage pickup and human services caseworker in touch. And as I said in my opening, stabilizing people, making sure that we know where people are when they don't have access to phones and electricity a lot of times. That's how we are going to make an impact in this area. Thank you.
I love this question because it's how I spent 2.5 years trying to do my work. So as a planning director working first things that actually I did coming into that role, having no previous data set, was building out actually where are all of our services, like formal, where are all of the shelters, day centers, where are they geographically located, mapping them out and looking district by district. And of course, what we found is that District 1 has very limited services. What followed with my sub-regional planning team was we actually held a district-specific workshops for every district and brought together some of our partners that are working most closely with unhoused folks in every district to talk through and say, you know, especially for D1, they're without the formal services there. Where are people going in lieu of the formal services? Where are the places that they're congregating? What are they trying to access? What are the most common needs? And trying to develop a place-based strategy to that point, because that is the heart of how we can actually create a meaningful service system. Because our service system needs to work like an ecosystem, and having a range of supports geographically accessible is really important. And that's something I committed to working on and was working on. Of course, we need funding to be able to bring those things online, and that was something that I held firm and fought for, trying to bring online additional services from daytime places where folks can be to get connected to additional housing supports and so on.
Talking to a lot of community members, I hear the word, the city is failing us quite often, and I think this is where an area where we are failing our unhoused neighbors. You know, we focus so much on housing first, but I believe, you know, while we do need housing, we also need services as well. We need the wraparound service especially. And, you know, we need to really use city money to invest in what's working. I love groups like REACH, LEAD, and those outreach groups that's funded through HSD, Housing Services Department, Human Services Department, to be able to do that work. And while I do believe we need regional approach, I think it's also all about implementation and getting down to the very level of on the ground and what is happening. I know there's a lot of issues with meeting people's needs, especially when people don't want to go to a concrete shelter. They want a tiny home village. And how do we make sure we get to know people, we build that trust so they're willing to go inside, that there is that one friend or partner or service worker, case manager who will partner with them and help them throughout their journey so they're not losing trust and getting a new person they have to get to know. A lot of people move around, they want to stay in a certain community, they want to stay with their friends. How do you build that community especially? I think we really need to tackle this from a ground level and a people level, and make sure that we're compassionate at the same time. My work with Community Watch, we go to encampments, and we get to know people, and part of that is seeing people, listening, acknowledging.
I think something that all of us have mentioned here is there's a lot of amazing on-the-ground work happening in the city. We are a city that fundamentally that has a culture of compassion. And what I'd like to see is be able to figure out how can we bridge the grassroots work that's happening in communities with the institutions and the resources of the city. One of the really big things I'd love to work on is finding those opportunities for local community partnerships. Because we have a lot of communities that where English is not their first language, or they have mistrust of government because of coming from war-torn regions. Community organizations, as we saw during the pandemic, provided a very big, helped fill that gap. So I'd like to see more partnership with that. I'd also like to work on expanding the number of caseworkers and social workers we have to bring that more personal approach. One of the other things that I'd also want to look at is expanding the concept we have of resiliency hubs. We're talking about resiliency hubs, especially in the comp plan, primarily from the perspective of climate. What if we thought about them as community resiliency hubs, where you can go there for clean air when there's wildfires, where you can go for a cooling shelter when it's hot outside. And we have a bunch of community centers in the region. We just need to figure out how we revitalize them and build them as key parts of our neighborhoods.
All right. Well, we're going to stay with the theme of housing. This time, kind of from where it's coming from. Seattle is an expensive housing market, causing many to lose their homes. forced out of the city, or for the most unfortunate, landing on the streets as homeless? Are there more humane ways of dealing with unhoused residents than with sweeps? What would you do? On the other hand, how do you propose to deal with personal security concerns, real or perceived, of residents as they see encampments popping up across the district and city?
Yeah, Mr. Thompson. You're good, you're great.
So to that end, I'm going to talk about two examples of two programs that we've seen success in when it comes to addressing housing stability and addressing homelessness. When it comes to an alternative to sweeps, we've seen great success with the State Right-of-Way Initiative. What is that? That was a project and funding put forward by Governor Inslee to address encampments on state right-of-ways. And through partnerships with WashDOT, as well as King County Regional Homelessness Authority, and the really important service providers that do the work, like PDA, this is an approach where funding is put forward and we go through a process of spending weeks on time to have caseworkers develop a relationship with folks that may be in an encampment, develop a buy-in list, develop a plan, and through this initiative actually provide a housing option. And seeing the resounding success when they're offering a housing option, a place for somewhere to go, folks would accept and remain in that housing option. So this is something that's been tremendously successful with multiple successful encampment resolutions being a part of it. The other thing I want to talk about is a result of a resource made available through the American Rescue Plan. These were called the emergency housing vouchers. These were vouchers that were made available as a result of the pandemic. The vouchers were brought to the housing authority, so Seattle Housing Authority, King County Housing Authority, and through our partnerships with housing authorities, we were able to successfully use all of them and use them.
So I agree that sweeps are not ideal. No one likes sweeps. But for now, what Alexis was talking about is similar to the city plan, where months ahead we go to an encampment and we try to connect people to resources, services, and find people housing. And before that resolution happens for that encampment, there are a lot of people who refuse these services, and that requires building that trust with the case manager and having a partner with them through their journey. And so my group, the Community Watch, we go to encampments and we invite everyone and businesses, many people from our community, to walk with us. And many times I've heard after walks, people are like, oh, I thought unhoused people were kind of scary, but no, they're really kind and friendly. I'm like, yes, you just get to know your neighbors, get to know your community. And so I think, there's that private public partnership where there are a lot of amazing organizations doing this work, but there's also us as neighbors in our community who could do this work as well, who go out and build that trust, build those relationships, try to help people with resources to help make that connection. And I think that helps a lot, especially when you build that trust and you know somebody. And there's that perception of public safety versus the reality of it. And I think that perception is slightly skewed here in the city of Seattle, and we need to get to know what's real.
I think for one of the things to prevent it, we need to stop incentivizing housing as an investment in Seattle. Like with all people that are getting calls for, oh, I'll buy your house and they'll take it and they'll flip it, like fundamentally we need to be able to build more housing that fundamentally focuses on finding ways to keep people in these communities where they are, instead of having to move them further and further away from the places that they've called home. With encampments specifically, I want to see more embedded response within these encampments, because we have a lot of the people who are in these situations have a lot of usually some temporary conditions that are getting them there. And so we need to have some of those resources embedded, and I think this is where community partnership comes into perspective a lot. By working with local community organizations that have been trying to address this within their own circles, it can help kind of build it as a more safe environment and also address some of the safety concerns. Because it, like Tanya mentioned, it builds that proximity and that closeness. I think this also provides an opportunity for kind of expanding into what you mentioned before, which is like expanding a caseworker or social worker core within the city to be able to provide more comprehensive responses.
I work a lot on land use policy, and I bring that up because I think that hostile architecture, it leads to hostile society. And I mean that by, the question in particular caught my ear in terms of humane treatment of our unhoused neighbors, and sweeps are inhumane. And encampment resolutions are basically sweeps by another name. I was at an encampment resolution this last week where somebody was, basically told, do you want shelter? She said, can I do this? No, that's not available, then I can't go there. And then she was swept. So there was no long-term meeting, hanging out, trying to get connected to her. And the trust of our unhoused neighbors comes from the reality that we don't have the resources and they know it. And so we need to make sure that we are supporting the neighbors that we've already mentioned that come into the encampments every day and bring food and bring shelter and bring resources and make sure that they are stabilized. We need to make sure that there are sanitation services, waste management, bathrooms, and caseworkers that meet on a regular basis, that all the wraparound services are needed. We need to support neighbors first.
Okay, we're going to change the topic to climate. We had lots of questions we could have asked, but this is the one we are going to. As the world is experiencing, the effects of climate change are coming at us faster than previously predicted. Droughts, floods, wildfires, infestations, failed crops, mass migration, all are happening. As daunting and overwhelming as these conditions are, what would you do to make Seattle a leader in responding to the challenges of climate change, both in trying to reduce our contribution to carbon emissions and in protecting us from the inevitable effects of those changes? Tanya?
Thank you for that question. It's a really important question because as the chair of the Seattle City Light Sustainability Arts and Culture Commission, this is something we're tackling. It's a beautiful day like today. I mean, we think about our ice caps and the electricity generation through our hydroelectric dams and what that would like in the future, how to make sure our grid is resilient, and making sure that we are able to switch over from gas to electric, but at the same time that we're not leaving our underserved, marginalized communities behind. And so how do we make Seattle a leader? I think we look at not only conservation attempts, but we also look at the environment. We're not meeting our tree canopy goals. We're supposed to be at 30%, and we're not meeting that, and we're not on target to be able to reach that. And so I think that comes with some things my committee is looking at is a tree strategy plan. How are we able to preserve and plant more trees so that we're not living on heat islands and heat deserts, basically, and are able to help, especially communities that suffer the most from the lack of trees and open spaces, be able to enjoy those areas. Communities look at how are we able to switching from gas to electric is very expensive. How do we help communities, especially people on fixed income, or refugees, or immigrant community, be able to make that switch? We also need to look at making sure that these resources are available to those communities, that they're aware that they're there. Another thing we need to look at is a lot of policies and legislations regarding not only grid resiliency, planning for trees in our next generation, but also planning on conservation, as well as looking at what the state's doing.
I think one of the things that we're also missing, kind of building off what the others said on climate change, is that we need to make sure that we're doing so in an economically just manner. And one of the frustrations that I've seen is that a lot of the solutions for climate change rely on individuals having resources to do it, whether it's you need to go buy an electric car, which is $30,000. We're spending multiple millions of dollars on new ferries with a bunch of extra waste from parts that could have been used well. So I think that with this lens of economic justice, we need to start thinking about, we're in one of the most innovative parts of the United States and of the world. We have the talent to try new things. And a lot of the solutions that you see happening at the national and the global level start local. And so I think what I'd like to see is I'd like to see more partnerships with research organizations that we have here to think through new ideas. Like maybe we don't replace all the ferries with electric ferries. Maybe we start pursuing, I was reading the other day about algae-based biofuels that we can use as drop-ins for every car on the road. That's much better than asking everybody to go buy a new electric car and throw those away. So I think we need to start thinking about what's that experience that a person has to take every day, and what are solutions that we can think big about to really come with a complete solution.
I get to talk about land use again, yay. Because land use is directly tied to our environment. We build around cars, and cars are the vast majority of our carbon emissions. And so if we don't get serious about transitioning ourselves away from a car-centric, oil-based society, we aren't ever going to meet our climate goals. And I take our lead. I believe that we as a city should be much more involved in taking a lead from the Coast Salish people and the Duwamish tribe specifically, who are still here in Seattle and have tended this land since time immemorial in a very sustainable way. And I know that there are programs already in place to clean up the Duwamish, and there are restoration projects that are being supported. And yet I still see the Duwamish tribe coming into meetings with the city council and begging for EDI to not be changed, and they're being ignored. So I think that we really do need to acknowledge the people who actually have the long-term experience on this land and know how to tend to it first. I also think that in terms of our current policy, in terms of how we are in the reality, the floor area ratio is a very technical term in terms of building, and that's one of the primary ways that we're going to save the tree canopy, because the vast majority of mature trees are on private land. And so if we don't make it possible for people to build out the land that for more housing, if we keep floor area ratios small and tiny, that's going to destroy much more trees. Thank you.
We need a just transition to a green economy, and through that, really focusing on how we invest in our transportation infrastructure, as well as our housing and just residential and how we build our infrastructure moving forward. With that, we can do a lot in terms of expanding our transit system to make it a more enticing option, an easier option than using a vehicle. We talked a little bit about the fact that vehicles, we've built our city around prioritizing passenger vehicles, but we can do more. We have made progress in being able to have more enticing transportation options. The light rail ride between Capitol Hill to New District Stop is 6 minutes. That is the fastest way to get there, without a doubt. That is a better transportation option. But also looking at the fact that, a third of our emissions also come from our buildings. And so making sure that we are supporting a transition and implementing electric heat pumps as well is something that we can be doing, building towards to lowering emissions from buildings. We, as Seattle, we have one of the highest standards in green energy in our building code, and we can take steps in order to make sure that all of our infrastructure is scaled up and able to meet that code. And we also elevate that, as was mentioned, EDI was under threat a couple weeks ago. EDI, the Equitable Development Initiative, is funded through Jumpstart funding. Important to also note that Jumpstart also funds our Green New Deal initiatives. And so standing by and protecting, making sure that that money is going into our climate investments is a priority.
That's right? Okay. All right. Well, we're going to change a little bit to the Seattle Times recently editorialized about violence in and around Seattle schools and concluded that proposals by the Seattle School District for increased mental health services, for example, are important in the long run but they are not adequate to address the current situation. A call upon the mayor and city council to take action to protect our students. What measures would you propose and support to address this problem?
Yeah, mental health is definitely a very important component of it. I think what we fail to address in a lot of these, we fail to address the systemic factors that cause violence. I'm of the opinion that we're not inherently violent people, we're pushed to violence in one way or another. And so I think what we need to do is ensure that we are building, this goes back to what I was mentioning about having a social safety net, ensuring that we have food, we have shelter. People are going to be less drawn to more violent means or theft or other types of crime when they feel they have their needs being met and when they feel they're being listened to. So I want to see more engagement, not just with students, but also with families, to figure out, are we giving our children a stable home and a stable environment to live in? Because I think that's one thing that where we tend to feel a lot of these problems in isolation and boxing within specific agencies or initiatives or jurisdictions or whatever. We need to start thinking about what is that whole picture? What is the student experiencing that is drawing them to these situations? And that's what I would like to focus on.
Yeah, violence comes from desperation, in my opinion, too. We know for a fact that universal basic income works. There's been studies done in the United States and around the world that when we stabilize people at a bare minimum, when people are able to be fed, housed, and clothed, that they thrive. They bring more to their own lives, and then they start to contribute back to society. And so we do need to invest in a social safety net, and I think that as Seattle, we could implement a city-wide UBI. That is a long-range plan, but it is something that I have worked with advocates in the Seattle area for years, and I would love to bring that idea into City Hall and be a strong advocate for that kind of service. I also want to speak specifically about kids and schools. When I was in teacher training school, we did exercises, and one of the exercises was around a kid who was feeling angry and violent, and the kind of thing was like, "Are you hungry?" Right? That's what we as teachers were trained to ask first, and that goes back to the basic needs. Is like we have violence in our society because we treat each other like we don't matter. Like the tax-based dispersion of our schools is based on property value. And so can we work with PTSAs around the city? Can we work together and make sure that our resources are more evenly distributed amongst all the schools instead of being in one area?
This is such a complex issue, and what helps me stay grounded in some of this is thinking about this in kind of three main tranches. Like, how do we prevent? What are the solutions and policies that we put forward towards prevention? What changes do we need to make about our immediate response? And then how do we help communities heal, also in the aftermath? I committed to, in this campaign, listening to communities most impacted by violence, which is why I was at Garfield after the shooting a few weeks ago. Also a neighbor. I live in the Central District a few blocks away, and so really showing up to just be in community, and it makes me emotional to think about, because there's a lot of pain there, and there will continue to be pain until we are really investing in young people and giving communities the supports that they need. And that was the common thread I heard across from parents and students. We need to invest in young people now more than ever. There's still so much that students are carrying coming out of the pandemic. And also, we know that many young people go to school hungry or experiencing all kinds of things in their households too. And so, looking on the prevention front, how do we continue to invest in young people from a behavioral health standpoint? What kind of changes do we also make in terms of our immediate response? And looking at how do we help communities heal in the aftermath of all of that? How do we truly make sure that we're building a felt response in the hopes that we never have situations like this, of course, but thank you.
I grew up here in Seattle. I did not grow up with school shootings. We cannot normalize this. But I did grow up in the time of gang wars. I remember growing up, my mom would make us lie down, take a nap because there was a shooting right outside of our house. And I had my sister was in a gang. I had cousins who got stuck in gang crossfire. And I feel like that's what we're not talking about is while there are still gangs out there, they're unstructured. So I think we really need to focus on our youth. We need to focus on prevention, mental health, especially mental health in schools. Hurt people, and that's the bottom line. And so I love to see more mentorship. I mentored a young woman who pulled a knife on her classmates and threatened to slash people. And mentored her, and she was an amazing young person and went on to go to college and do amazing things. And so I think there need more programming for our young people, making sure that our community centers have late night basketball, our libraries are open, and that community comes out to support our kids. We also need to especially listen to these communities that are affected with violence. I know that this is going to be a hard conversation, but do we need school resource officers? What are the kids wanting? What are the administration wanting? And how do we help with that? I think we also need to make sure that there are, something I'm working on is a youth prevention initiative. How do we get families involved?
Thank you, and I apologize. Apparently the battery died. Is it?
Should be good now.
Wait. All right, I am sorry, Tanya. Thanks for keeping on. Okay, the next question is about the transportation plan. In April, the council adopted a 20-year transportation plan. In May, the mayor put forward a $1.45 billion transportation levy, which will appear in the November ballot. I hope that's correct. Do you support the levy? What do you think will be the most critical features of the levy and the transportation plan?
They almost timed this video.
I know. Where are my notes? I've actually been very active with the transportation levy support group with my activities with the Transit Writers Union. We're collaborating with Seattle Neighborhood Greenways, with the Urbanists, with a lot of other organizations. We're trying to make sure that we maintain good transit access for our city, and we don't delve into depending on security forces as a way of funding or of putting our funding into transit, because that's not going to actually improve the transit services. If what we really want to do is make sure that we have clean and safe buses, maybe we should hire a group to clean the buses at the end of every route, right? We choose what to prioritize, where to put our money, and some people think that somebody just being as a security guard versus somebody who is there to actually take tickets and assist the driver. These are programs that have around the world, and so I think the transportation levy is a good start. We need much more money. We need to focus on sidewalks, very much. We don't have sidewalks in most of Seattle, in most of District 5 and District 1 and 2. I apologize. There was a lot of numbers are going through my head right now, because I'm just like, one of the things in terms of all of our advocacy is that we seem to want to spend more money on cars instead of transit, and we need to make the exact opposite decision.
Well, I'm somebody who doesn't have a car, so any investment in expanding public transit, I'm excited about, because it means we can navigate the city easier. And so with the transportation plan, really excited that we're going to be seeing the levy coming through. When community groups came together to start identifying the needs that we really need across our communities, from sidewalks, from buses, from train, from light rail, and so on, as well as bike infrastructure, the need was identified as costing about $3 billion, which is much higher than the current levy is being proposed at, And I think it speaks to what our communities want to see in terms of our upcoming infrastructure. People want to be able to move through the city easily in a climate-friendly way and be safe in that as well. And in the past couple of weeks, we've seen that further exemplified by the unfortunate traffic-related deaths that have happened. We need to be working towards Vision Zero and creating a safe community for pedestrians. I'm an avid pedestrian. Again, not having a car, if I can walk there and it's reasonable, I will. It is frightening to think about our community members that have passed on because our streets were not safe enough. Those are necessary investments, and I'm committed to making sure that we continue to scale, making sure that the levy passes so we can be able to expand and do those transportation investments, but knowing that we need to do a lot more to expand our transit system and make safer streets for everybody.
So yes, the transportation plan and the levy coming up in the fall. If we don't pass this, we will not have money for our roads, for infrastructure. And so I am excited about this once-in-a-lifetime investment. It's one of the largest levies, transportation levies ever. Right now, City Council, we're taking the mayor's plan, we're adding our own amendments. There's been amendments to increase the plan and amendments to prioritize districts for more sidewalks. And so I believe that our vote is coming in beginning of July. I believe it's the first week of July where we will actually vote amendments and vote on the transportation levy, and that is what's going to appear in your ballot. But yes, I agree, we do need sidewalks. I think sidewalks is the uniting factor in everything, and making sure that those sidewalks, safe routes to schools, build out sidewalks to transit, especially making sure we have sidewalks to that are safe. The city sees a lot of lawsuits regarding our sidewalks. How do we make sure that doesn't happen going forward? We need to definitely, Vision Zero has kind of stayed the same. We haven't gotten better with traffic deaths. And so how do we really make that investment to improve those numbers so that people aren't dying on our roads? We also need to especially look at making sure that underserved neighborhoods, people who are fixed incomes, we're looking at anywhere from $400 to $500 additional a month for this levy that they can have the services needed.
Yeah, I think I'm really excited about the levy as well, like everyone else here. I think one of the things is that, as much as I'm frustrated about how regressive our tax system is, this in the long term is going to save money for everybody at every level. I think one of the things that, and this is a way I approach policy generally, is that we want to incentivize the thing that's best for the community. And there's two ways to do that. There's one is ensuring that everyone has the capability to live without a car. And two, make sure that process is easy. I could drive from Fremont to downtown, but I'm paying $30 parking. Or I can take the bus that comes hopefully more frequently because I take it for you. Or I can take a bicycle over one of the greenways. So focusing on that I think is going to be really important. I think in a lot of the places where we don't have good coverage right now, we need to focus on last mile assistance. Metroflex has been a fantastic program that we've seen rolled out across Renton and Skyway. I want to see more of that expanded to other places so that we can connect people to these big hubs, especially as we expand light rail and mass transit. Focusing on making the process easy. Like the metric I have in my head is it shouldn't take more than 50% longer to take a bus to public transit versus a car. And I think if we can keep that perspective in mind and start looking at the data through this, I think we can get there, and I think this levy is a great place to start.
Okay, this is going to be a 1 minute question. So I'll give you a 1 minute time. So we're going to do finally. Not all of you will actually get a seat on the city council, at least this time around. Well, you already has it, but you know what I mean. If you could give the ultimate city council member a skill, attribute, or position from your toolbox, what would it be, and how do you think it would help the council member be the best representative they could be for us? And yes, you get this first.
I think in to truly work across all communities and bring people together and put the issue on the table first and be able to really do the hard work of figuring out where can we meet in the middle, what is the absolutes that we need to get through, and where do we not agree, and how can we work around that. I think the ability to work across and bring communities together is what we need in this moment. And being able to do that with integrity and being able to do that in an honest and transparent way is a skill that is really needed in more levels of government. I think we'd be able to move the needle a lot faster if we're just not honest about, where we stand and have somebody who's willing to do the hard thing, rally the hard conversation, and create the space where people are willing to engage honestly. That would be what I would look for.
The one skill I would hope that this person would have, and I'm sure they have it already, is being able to listen. And we've been talking to you all night, but I think the most important thing is just to have to hear what you have to say, what have you seen, what issues are most important to you. We are a public servant, we should be out in public. We also are here to serve you. And so you will pick somebody in the fall who you believe will listen, who will take all the factors and all the issues and circumstances and make a reasonable decision. And somebody, especially who you can get a hold of, someone who you see out in the community you can talk to, I think is very important. And I know everybody here at this table has that amazing skill. And sometimes when things get really stressful and there are a lot of things happening all at once, I think we just gotta take a moment, breathe, stop talking, and listen. And then I always tell people, I don't have very many original ideas. Like, all my ideas are from you. So I hope you will reach out, and thank you.
I'd say I'd give my power of invisibility. No, I'm kidding. I'm not even here. I'd say the big thing is empathy. Ultimately, we all act and behave in certain ways for a reason. Whether that is an experience that we had growing up, whether that is even a small annoyance that we find on our morning walk, there's always a reason behind something. And whoever has this position, I think, fundamentally needs to hold that, especially being a citywide position where you're going to be working with people with so many different backgrounds. Fundamentally, understanding those incentives and understanding how people behave and what drives people, I think, is how we really build a city that is actually connected and rooted in community, not feeling so separate as we have felt in the last decade.
I'm going to go with compassion. That's one of the things, that's one of the skills that has served me very well in life. I didn't know I was autistic until I was about 34, 35, and I experienced a lot of prejudice that I didn't understand because of the different ways that I communicate and think about the world. And so I had to develop a lot of compassion to others and try and understand how the majority of the rest of the world kind of saw things and were able to communicate that. And since then, I have become an autistic communications teacher, and I work with people who are having fundamental disagreements in terms of, how they approach a topic, and being able to see that realization that they agree on something they were just saying in different words is really powerful. And so I think that sense of compassion is what is going to serve the council member well.
So now it's 2 minutes for closing, and we'll start with you, Tanya.
So I believe that complex issues demand hands-on solutions. I'm a person of action. I've been out in community. When the pandemic started and everyone was closing their doors, I strapped on my mask. I went out there and started walking around my neighborhood, making sure our residents and our small businesses, our in-house neighbors were okay, and basically reaching out, trying to develop that trust in our communities. When I saw that there needed to be affordable housing, I helped develop a building from fire-damaged shell into 84 units of workforce housing, which only charges our tenants a percentage of their income, so no one's forced to pay rent they cannot afford. When I found out that, my community did not feel like it was being heard. Tried to connect more community members, non-speakers, refugee immigrants to government. So took them into city council chambers, King County chambers, and tried to get them to learn how to engage with their representatives and their electeds. If they really want their voices heard, they need to go to the powers of government. And so trying to make those connections, I'm most interested in how do we connect communities furthest away from government so that these resources are available. And that's something I think about every day. I like to bring hands-on solutions and fulfill that commitment to our constituents. I like looking at nuance and that gray area and looking at all sides of an issue. And so I believe that my community work is applicable to the entire city when it comes to housing, affordability, when it comes to how do we help with economic development. I mean, 60% of the general fund in the city comes from B&O tax, from our small businesses, and I think that's a way of how we engage our youth. How do we start entrepreneurship? How do we help with economic mobility? How do we close that wealth gap within our communities, and especially help our Black and brown and communities of color be able to access the same resources that everyone else in the city can access? And so those are the things that I'm most interested in. I'm working hard to collaborate and empower communities and create a thriving city. Thank you.
First off, I want to thank everyone for coming here. I know it's wonderful to be outside, and I would much rather be outside than in here. Save the company. But I think one of the things that I want you all, and I'm going to ask myself to think about as we move into getting closer to the primary, is really thinking of how can we bring someone into this position that really makes government work better for everyone. When I go to a library, when I go to get help for advocating for renters' rights, I should feel that same level of welcomeness that I have in my corner store, or the coffee shop I go to every day, or the library, or the different community organizations and churches. Fundamentally, that is what I think that someone in this position needs to do. We need to be able to look at what are the challenges that we are facing as a broad community and really take that to the highest level. I want to be able to go to my representative, get a response from them, and say, hey, it looks like there's this problem that we've noticed here. This is the thing that we're going to do about it. And I think that's what you all have the right to demand from whoever you put in this position. The other thing I'll use my last few seconds is, everyone except Alexis does not qualify for vouchers, so I encourage you, if you have 5 minutes, even if you're not voting for any of us, to come and help us sign to qualify, because that is free money for elections, and I think it's one of the best things we've done. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, I kind of was thrown by that, oh wow, I have to think about that now. No.
I hope you 10 seconds.
But basically, as I started my opening, I am a daughter of Seattle. I was born here in 1983. I went to elementary school here through 3rd grade, and then had moved down to Fresno because of my dad's family being from there. But after my years of banishment, I was back and for college at Seattle University in 2001. And in the last 20 years, I have served Seattle. I serve Seattle despite having very little, because I know the more I get back, the more I give back, the more I get from my community. I worked at Tree House for Kids when I was in college because I was a former foster kid for a while. I worked with Cascade Bicycle Club because I know that transforming our streets is going to have a direct impact on our environment and our quality of life. I've worked with Transit Writers Union. I'm currently working with the Seattle Renter Organizing Council to develop an Office of Renting Standards so that both people who rent and people who provide housing are able to have a one-stop shop, as it were, to resolve conflicts and tensions and make sure that everybody is on an even playing field. And I think that's really the fundamental aspect of this role right now, is that we aren't all working on an even playing field. Stark mentioned, like, the Democracy Voucher Program was meant to enable us, people like me who have negative wealth and come from a lack of resources, that we were supposed to be able to run a really strong campaign with public money, but now we have to raise money before we can access public money. And so these are the kinds of details that leave people behind. And as somebody who has directly experienced this my entire life, I know that I have the knowledge and determination to make changes and make sure people listen to the changes that need to be made. Thank you.
I mentioned earlier that I was brought to this work because of my upbringing and being raised by my grandparents and seeing what my birth parents went through from their experiences with substance use disorder, homelessness, and incarceration. I've become committed my career, my life, to trying to work to safeguard, protect families, and serve people in every way, and minimize harm that happens. And with that, I fully believe that I'm here today because I had community resources around me. And I'm committed to making sure that we can keep those community resources and continue to invest in people. And so that is why a couple weeks ago I testified twice to protect the Equitable Development Initiative, because we cannot balance our budget deficit on the backs of Black and brown communities. We need to protect our investments, we need to fund our city services, and we need corporations to pay their fair share. I've bridged my experiences across the board, from being a waitress to being a canvasser for Planned Parenthood, the people with the tablets that you avoid, work to fundraise for Planned Parenthood. I've led protests against the Trump administration, multiple demonstrations, really fighting that fight. And I've brought governments together under unanimous votes multiple times to try and create regional solutions, bring people to the table, be focused on solutions. And I continue to do work bringing institutions together in our budgeting office at UW. I'm ready to tackle the very real challenges that our city is facing, like the budget crisis, our housing crisis, and climate change. But more than that, I'm ready to do the work to make sure that our rights are safeguarded as we look at the potential, and I say potential, I truly do not hope it comes to this, but the potential of a Trump presidency. We need a strong, courageous leader on council who will make sure that important legislation remains in place. We are protecting our rights.
Thank you. And thank you all. And thank you for being here. This is doing the hard work of democracy, and I hope people appreciate how hard it is, and just running for office is such a valuable commitment. Thank you for that. I would also, on the other side, I would also like to invite you to our picnic in August 22nd, which will be in my front yard. And